Old characters, items, even skills have been wiped from RuneScape entirely, but chances are you wouldn't even know they existed despite one causing RuneScape's most famous glitch ever. Everything in this video was found through a pretty interesting process. It wasn't through contacting Jagex or digging through old screenshots. It was all found on a bunch of old computers. But I need to rewind a bit first. Ooh, not far enough. Keep going, keep going. RuneScape originally started as a browser game that worked on just about every computer regardless of its specs. You could play it at home, in the library, at your grandma's house on Christmas while everyone is telling you to get off the computer and spend time with family. What they don't understand, you could play it anywhere. Best of all, because it was a browser game, you didn't have to download anything. At least that's what it looked like. RuneScape may run in the browser and not require you to download any executables or installers, but it does need to actually install the game files on your computer. They're just hidden away and you'd probably never even know they were there unless you went looking for them. These files are known as the RuneScape cache. Every time an update is pushed out, files are added, deleted, or changed in the cache. Over the years, players have found ways to decompile it, and it's led to a ton of cool stuff, like finding items that aren't seen anywhere in game, being able to easily animate characters, and some awesome RuneLite features. It's also led to some not so great stuff, but that's a topic for another time. Now, over RuneScape's 20-year history, the cache has changed a ton, and Jagex doesn't have any backups of what it was prior to the 2007 version that old school RuneScape is built on. In fact, they don't have any backups of RuneScape at all prior to 2007, and the one they did have for old school was created really by pure luck. Jagex didn't actually start doing systematic backups until 2012, and the 2007 backup only existed because of an unknown system admin who thought it would be a good idea to make one. So that means a ton of RuneScape's early history was completely lost. Unlike Jagex, I know a lot of you like to plan for the future. Well guys, in our near future, around age 35, 2 out of 3 of us will experience some form of male pattern baldness. This is where the sponsor of today's video, Keeps, comes in. Keeps offers clinically proven, research-backed treatments to stop hair loss and improve hair growth. It's not that sketchy stuff you see in weird internet ads. When you sign up, a Keeps physician will help you select the right products for your specific condition and hair goals. And after that, it's all shipped straight to your door. It's cheaper than going through a traditional pharmacy, and it's all done online, so no awkward in-person doctor's visits. Best of all, in case you do have questions for a doctor, every treatment plan comes with a full year of unlimited messaging, so you can ask your prescribing doctor anything at any time. Hair loss stops with Keeps. To get 50% off your first order, go to keeps.com/Colonello or click the link in the description below. That's keeps.com/Colonello. Now this is where the old computers I mentioned a minute ago come in. Let's say you played RuneScape in 2005 and got a new computer for Christmas. Chances are that old computer has either been thrown away or put in a closet where it hasn't been turned on ever since. Assuming time hasn't destroyed it, that computer has a perfectly intact copy of the RuneScape cache from 2005. If you were to take that cache and decompile it, there's likely a ton of forgotten content in it, or maybe even content that has never been seen before. Jagex would oftentimes store things in the cache intended for future updates that never ended up releasing. The process I just described is exactly what the wiki team has done with numerous versions of the game, and you might be able to help too. But I'll explain that at the end because it's time for what you've all been waiting for. Let's take a look at all the weird and wacky stuff hidden away. But first, I have to give a huge shout out to Hallways, Log, and Cook from the RuneScape wiki teams, because this video definitely wouldn't have been possible without their information. Okay, let's go. Early RuneScape 2 is a pretty mysterious time, especially the RuneScape 2 beta. There's a lot of things from back then that never made it into the final game. One recent discovery is the LM Longsword. It was originally going to be the reward from the Elemental Workshop quest before later being replaced by the Elemental Shield. The Fremennik area was also quite a bit different, as back then they were just called Vikings, and despite their more generic name, they looked much different than they do today. They look like some sort of anime superhero cosplay gone wrong. Speaking of weird outfits, everybody's favorite NPC, the Gnome Child, originally didn't wear a hat, and man, he looks weird, kinda just like a kid version of a bot character. It's a little unsettling. Before the RuneScape 2 beta though, there was obviously what's now known as RuneScape Classic. Back in the early 2000s, when the player base was a tiny fraction of what it is today, Andrew Gower was experimenting with giving players their their own houses. They'd be able to purchase, furnish, and improve them as they see fit. Most importantly though, they'd have a place to store their items, as at the time, banks only stored gold. Aside from that, it sounds a bit like construction, huh? Well, the main difference is that these houses would instead exist in RuneScape's major cities. Housing sections were first added to Varrock, but as the game grew in popularity, Andrew added some to Falador. What makes these houses even more interesting is nobody has ever seen the inside of them. Well, except for one lucky player who was accidentally teleported there by Andrew, but you're probably catching on to the theme of this video by now. Thanks to cache files, we can not only see what they were supposed to look like back then, but actually explore them using a recreated version of Classic from 2001. So just like back then, banks only store GP, there's also all the retro skills like the good and evil versions of magic, prayer, hiding, and influence, and in fact, it's so old, the option to turn PvP on everywhere for your player also exists. I actually talked about that in a previous video, and there were so many comments from people that just didn't believe me that PvP used to be on everywhere. So there's your proof. So my character is currently in the Varrock player-owned house area. Pretty much every building is empty, but they come in all shapes and sizes. There's normal houses, apartment buildings, and even massive castle-like ones intended for clans. Speaking of clans, if you want to join one in old school, check out the video on how to join mine in the description below. The house I'm standing in actually still exists in RuneScape today, and if you've ever done the Rat Catcher's quest, you've been inside it. On screen now, there's a little time lapse of how the house and the surrounding area has changed over the years. It's somehow managed to survive nearly 2 decades. Most of the other houses were either removed or converted into something else. For example, Falador's party room used to be another massive clan house. Funnily enough, before they were all removed, they were each going to be auctioned off to the highest bidding player. There's all this talk of people buying digital land at crazy prices with crypto lately, but I can only imagine how much these houses would go for today if they still existed. For years, RuneScape's only available pet was a cat. Most people figured, well, they added cat pets, so dogs should theoretically be next, right? Jagex said, nope, Pet Cthulhu. So in the Rum Deal quest, there's a section where you have to go fishing and can catch slugs or Karam Thulus. Karam Thulus look like this, and their name is a combination of Karambwan and Cthulhu. Now, originally, after completing the quest, you were going to be able to keep Karam Thulu as a pet, but the idea was scrapped as the idea of adding summoning as a new skill was already being discussed internally by Jagex. However, there was a very obscure glitch soon after the quest was released, where if you died with a Karam Thulu in your inventory, it would follow you around for about 20 seconds before disappearing. It turns out the code for this pet was left in the game, and Mod Wilson, its developer, kind of kept it as just his personal test pet. Once summoning did release, the Karam Thulu returned again, but this time on purpose. It was renamed to Karam Thulu Overlord and can be spawned in with the summoning pouch. Now, Cthulhu may be the most powerful being on Earth, but not in RuneScape. If you ask any player what the strongest monster in old school RuneScape is, they'll probably either say, I don't know, or Verzik Vatur. Verzik has a combat level of 1,520 and is incredibly difficult to defeat, but technically she's not the strongest monster. There's an NPC known as Combat Test that has a level of 12,743, although you'll never likely run into it, as I don't think it can walk since it just looks like a combat dummy. Man, that would be very scary if it could. And it's likely, as the name implies, just for Jagex moderator testing. Speaking of JMods, throughout the years, they've added tons of references to the game to honor its many content creators and famous players. You have things like the Old Night Pub in Pharaoh's Enclave, the Broken Rune Crossbow in Mauritania. They of course added the white party hat to the game after seeing my channel's logo, joking by the way for anyone that couldn't tell. And you may not know it, but the mysterious stranger in the Myths Guild. When speaking to him, his dialogue is, well, nothing. But he's actually a reference to Wooks. He was the first player to ever solo the corporeal beast, among other insane achievements. And this NPC wears what he used to do it. Originally, his name was going to be Oxwo, which is, of course, Wooks switched around, and we would have never known that without the cache being searched because it was changed before release. Honestly, I think this reference would have been a lot more obscure had that information never gone public. Now, sometimes Jagex even makes references to their own developers. In the Monkey Madness 2 caves, there's 3 paths. One solved using agility, one solved by tanking damage, and a third inaccessible path. It would have been solved using agility and thieving, but I'm assuming the dev team just ran out of time. Regardless, there's an NPC on that path named Kinnear, who is based on Mod Kieran. You can't see him or reach him, but he does still exist in the live game right now, and according to Mod not asked should you somehow speak to him, he says, "I'm lost," and the player would respond with, "I'm lost too." Now, I'm not encouraging bug abuse, but if a no-clip glitch is ever found again, I'm hoping whoever discovers it makes a trip to this area. Another funny discovery is learning how Jagex programs things. There's a few NPCs in the game that you never actually see in-game, if that makes any sense. For example, Savant from the Wanted and Slug Menace quests. You only ever talk to her through the comm orb and never actually see what she looks like entirely from the neck down. However, that hasn't stopped players on the 2007 Scape subreddit from, well, I guess you could say giving her the Neve treatment. Anyway, since you never see her full character, it technically means Jagex doesn't have to make a character model for her, and in a lot of other cases with other NPCs, they just don't. They just give them a placeholder. For example, if you ever somehow spawned in the parrot from the Lunar Diplomacy quest, it'd look like this. Or the Pizzazz hat from the Mage Training Arena. Every time you put on that hat and talk to it, you're technically wearing him. My favorite though has to be the mounted heads you can place in your POH. They have chat heads, which of course means they have NPCs, and they're all just gray cats. Speaking of cats, let's talk about Bob, RuneScape's most famous cat and almost a father. Slight spoilers for the Tale of Two Cats quest, but hey, most of you probably spacebarred through it anyway. In the quest, Bob begins dating another cat named Neat. No, not that kind. At the end of the quest, there's a cute little cutscene where they travel around the world doing a ton of coupley stuff. You know, like talking cats do. But thanks to some cache digging, we now know the end was originally going to be very different. Bob and Neat were going to get married. There'd be a gnome with a 1930s camera taking pictures, and at some point, Neat would give birth to a kitten named Beep. Wow, RuneScape really has it all. Engaging bosses, hundreds of skilling activities, and a cat dating simulator. Most people watching this video have probably heard of the Falador Massacre, the glitch that allowed a player named Duriel321 to go on a PKing spree in Falador after being kicked from the first ever 99 construction house party. Despite being one of the most iconic MMORPG glitches of all time, nobody really seems to know what caused it. I had a few theories in the video I made about it over 5 years ago now, but nothing conclusive. Now we finally have some answers. So this story starts all the way back in RuneScape Classic. Black Knights dropped an item called flour. No, not a pot of flour, just flour. If you ground up wheat at a windmill, you'd also see that same item, but regardless of where you saw it, you actually couldn't pick up the flour and had to use an empty pot on it if you wanted to take it. Players later figured out they could cast the telegrab spell on it to take it without a pot, but it was useless. When RuneScape 2 released, Jagex removed the useless flour from the Black Knights drop table and changed how grinding wheat worked, but players who already had the item kept it, which meant it was RuneScape's third ever discontinued item for now. Jagex launched the construction skill in 2006, and along with it came the larder, an item that would allow players to get unlimited quantities of cooking items like buckets of milk and eggs. Whoever coded the larder made a mistake though. Instead of adding pots of flour to it, they accidentally added the useless flour. So for about a week after construction's launch, players had to drop the flour to the ground and use a pot on it in order to bake anything with it. Now to fix this problem, Jagex had to revamp construction's code. Once the patch was finished, it was released on June 6th, 2006. And well, you know what happened next. Now here's the thing, very important. None of this would have been possible without users submitting their caches. So if you want to help the wiki with this project, go grab out those old computers and click the link in the description below to learn how. Everyone else, maybe check out another one of my videos on the right hand side of the screen. Thanks for watching.